put together. So, oh, you just gave the update, great. We were going to talk with Larry in the valuation. I know Michelle, some of us read that finance committee meeting. I think we get some piece, but Larry will be here, I think, around the 6:30 block. I think it was really interesting what Michelle and, then I'd love to dial in a lot more into how do we categorize that new growth? How does it affect the tax rate? That's, in some ways, we know what the natural rate of increase in Ellsworth has been as some of the analysis we've done over the last 15 years here in Ellsworth. But if there's a new profile for new growth, in our TIF districts, and I think that's really, important to kind of figure that out. We're seeing some of our cost centers are seeing some pretty significant year-over-year increased costs, how those are going to play in, but I would love to know a little more about that. So looking forward to talking to Larry. Just in kind of general overview, if you could pull up that, the general overview where we're at. Now, I think we did some good work last week. I think we're getting pretty close to the large request. I kind of wanted to start on capital, and then we'll go into the administrative kind of outstanding pieces on Parks and Rec Director finalization decision, performance-based pay, the janitor, brief discussion of public works, and any outstanding questions. Michelle and I talked, as I sent in the email, that we're going to pull the vehicles discussion, table it for a little bit. We're not going to be passing until May, and circling back up with Enterprise. I know we did one kind of presentation on exactly what the state of all the fleet vehicles were, or the cost. There was, I want to have a lot better data just in front of you all for a recommendation moving forward, and expectations for those vehicles, how they'd be used. I really feel like they'll be anchored at City Hall. The Enterprise also gave me a kind of preview on some of the checkout systems they have, so we could, if there's requests for 4 vehicles, maybe we do 3, and there's more of a checkout system for those for the usage, and we kind of see how that goes. I know the code car we got a very good deal on earlier this year, so that's what some of the pricing we based it on, but I've also asked, hey, are there better deals? All the cars don't have to look the same. So there might be some smaller vehicles, especially if they're more of just, a staffer going from a variety of different facilities every day. Also, the janitor request on talking to Jim, that is a person who will be going from place to place to place all day long in the city, and will likely need a vehicle and probably some equipment as well. So I really, probably a 2-week time frame, so not next week, but the week thereafter. Probably bringing back Enterprise with a lot more data for this group to kind of, it's not a huge amount of the budget. It's not going to really probably affect the mill one way or the other with these leases, but it's been a hot topic of conversation in the community. And we've had some good discussion in council, and want to give you all the best data of what the vehicles would be used for, what the pricing estimates would be, how it affects the budget. So we'll table that for a bit. Very brief on legislative stipend towards the end. Maybe brief, you never know. There's just a few things that I kind of felt like I read the tea leaves of the way we were going to go on some of those items, but want to get your input. And then we'll kind of zoom out on the change log and just maybe a little bit background if you have questions on what we've included there. And the next steps, which to me is kind of that fleet vehicle discussion, and then maybe one additional meeting where we do a final review. This year, now that we have time and we've kind of gotten to a final place, to really go back through the budget book, go into each of the council recommendations based on, and like there's a narrative section at the beginning, and add the narratives that the council has kind of made the change on, just as for the historical records, so that next budget season, people can pick that up and say, oh, okay, the council said they didn't like that for these reasons this year, but maybe next year, or they're just opposed to this, it wasn't in line with our planning. So to get as close to possible for that transparent, perfect book. You can see much less notes on Tammy's binder.
I hear they snuck in and took out the sticky notes. So.
Yeah, so we had a great meeting, and I think I'll start with there before we go to the capital plan.
Charlie,
Yep.
if we're moving, I had a few local citizens, some folks approached me in the last week asking about commenting on things that were pertinent to budget. I'm only seeing, I think, one person here. I was wondering if it's okay with the council to have a brief citizen comment on things that's pertinent to the budget discussion?
Mm-hmm.
Earlier than later.
I'm
just
all
'cause-
for citizen comments.
Yeah, me too.
Let's do it.
That's right. So Amy, do you still want to speak, or,
Well, yeah.
unless you're happy to just sit for a couple hours and speak
No.
when you come up?
Can you come to the
Yeah, we wanna
microphone?
make sure.
The microphone, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure I'm speaking about the right thing. You had mentioned it was about,
Excuse me, could you just identify yourself for the
my
record?
name's Amy Reisman. I live here in town, Ellsworth, on
Great.
Franklin Street.
Great.
And,
Thank you for having the courage to come and speak.
well, I was under the impression that you might be talking about money spent for sidewalks in an upcoming bond. And so I just wanted to put my 2 cents in to say, we really need more. Just Franklin Street alone is a very, very, very busy street. You wouldn't think it is, but especially twice a day, the commuting hours, it becomes, the cutoff from Water Street.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people walk on it, and it's a really nice way to get from town to Harbor Park. And it's plenty of people who live in the apartments, it's two or three big apartment complexes right across from Harbor Park. So it gets a lot of foot traffic. We have no sidewalk. One of the streetlights is out, so at nighttime, it's dark. And the traffic comes up so quickly that it's difficult to even get out of the way. So I'm really hoping that, I'm sure it's happening on other streets. So I hope that you guys consider it, adding the need for money for sidewalks.
Yeah, so the discussion was really framing around a sidewalk paver and giving the ability of our public works teams to essentially start doing some analysis and saying, hey, it sounds like what you're talking is you need sidewalk over there, there's not one
There's
now.
none.
So potentially, and kind of a lot of the conversation revolved around, what does the public works team have the capacity to purchase such a piece of equipment and then do such a project? It's like where we'd like to get to, but at this period of time, with all the other pieces, that actually has me just thinking a lot about, yes, there's maintenance of our sidewalks, but there's probably connectivity, and then there's a village partnership initiative that Sarah's, our deputy city manager, is heading up and has a lot of experience in, that could be a massive, $30 million investment in this area that would probably have a holistic solution for how that connects to all around here. But that's kind of cold comfort on, that's probably 4 or 5 years if everything works perfectly and that funding comes in. That's a long time for the busy season to not have those there. So really interesting point. I'll have to look into that more and how we I know Sarah's also looking for capital improvement planning, I think about there's a sidewalk inventory and having better maps of these pieces in addition to a full roads assessment of everything in Ellsworth, so. But, yeah, very interesting.
You need to look at the right of way issue. 'Cause I don't know if there's enough right of way for us to
Yeah.
just go putting in.
That's what I was wondering too.
Because I agree that it needs a sidewalk, but there would have to be some negotiation on that to happen.
But I would add to your point, what we're looking at in this budget is getting a sidewalk snowplow, maybe a different word, so that the sidewalks we have are safe and people aren't walking in the middle of the road for 2 days after a storm.
Yeah,
So that's a first step.
also important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to let you know sidewalks are a concern of mine, a hope of mine, and, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's, I know Jim and I actually, our facilities director, also talked about that kind of recently too. I know when the teams are out plowing and the big, that's the priority, right? Is those roads, they need to be passable. And they, and then sometimes they're tired. They've been working an insane amount of hours. But the sidewalks out here are super important too. If we bring in a janitor, additional facilities people, I've also been thinking about Parks and Rec. If we're really gonna do that right, having buildings and grounds folks that, sure, the Public Works and their and their plow teams, the roads, that's their priority, but then there's another team here that also, Main Street, those sidewalks are critical areas that are seeing a lot of traffic, are safe, addressed immediately, in the same way we do the roads.
Well, an interim until there's money to make new sidewalks, could be to somehow get the traffic to be slower coming up Franklin Street.
Oh, now you ask too much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, we had a brief discussion as I was walking home the other day. I also live on Franklin. And during the discussion,
Thank you.
nearly got hit by like 3 cars. But,
Ugh.
Yeah, there's a critical gap there, and then I've mentioned it before too, the harbor to here. You can, but is it easy to walk from there to here? And you know, that could be the Riverwalk, it could be some different upgrades. The Village Partnership, of course, will always better to do a 10-to-1 or 3-to-1 match, whatever it is, so that it's majority funded elsewhere, but can we wait 5 years in some critical pieces? Maybe there is a future bond ban for roads, that it's like, actually, there's 2 or 3 pieces of sidewalk that we really need to, or maybe it's this paver and the equipment, and we factored into the public works time. You know, we've talked about, based on a lot of this budget conversation and highway and some of these bigger projects, maybe there's a bit of a like strategic planning. You know, this is the plan for highway for the year, these are the major projects we're gonna do, this is the blocking and tackling on things. I feel like sometimes we don't do a good enough job of communicating how much this crew does, and, you know, and how that's structured. I'm sure some of you may have seen the Harbor Park, I think I sent you the pictures, they've been
And the
prepping
paving
that.
started today, I drove by.
Paving
The
started,
gravel section's almost done.
Yeah.
so,
Be done tonight.
so yeah, they do amazing quick work, on a variety of different areas, so, but how much capacity do they have for some of those pieces, so. Love that little public comment on the top end. Anything else for council before I dive into the meat of it here? So a few things on just the general where we're at. So we went through a lot of Tammy's notes and a couple great catches, one of which was like a double payment on, to close out a bond this year, and it's literally like by one day. It's like due June 30th as opposed to July 1st. That wasn't the intent.
It wasn't even in the bond documents, so the amortization schedule was wrong.
Yeah, so the schedule's wrong. Our bond counsel, Jim Safian, kind of noted that as well. So, you know, we're gonna work with First National on can we get a one-day extension of the bond payment? And that will, like, you know, bring it to a one payment this FY '26, one payment FY '27, and so,
It's like 159,000, so it's pretty
Oh.
significant.
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll avoid that kind of double bond payment in 1 year. That just seemed to be a small administrative error. So we're expecting that to go through pretty well, so that's why we're actually in the net negative in the municipal side of things. Again, but we've had request increases, you know, there has been some increase to revenue sharing, so that's why, you know, we are where we are at now. We factored in most of the other increases. We changed around the solid waste on, my expectation was to raise like an additional 200,000 in revenue. We dropped that back to like 125 based on some stickers and some conversation with Soper. I don't think we're there yet on things that Sarah mentioned, we don't know the elasticity of demand on the sticker price change. Very true, very true, so.
Is it possible to change sticker prices in the middle of the budget season? If we meet again and decide it's not like linked to this budget?
No, and I think that's gonna be kind of a big focus, is throughout the next year, how do we do some reimagining in solid waste to potentially drive more revenue? And it'll be interesting this year to see how our expectations match up. Actually had some good conversations with League of Towns.
Okay.
Made me feel a little better. They spend a lot of funds on these types of things as well. But one of the select board people I was talking to was like a wildly interesting expert in solid waste and pricing and the different firms around here. So I want to pick his brain a little bit more. Also talked about, can we go together on like a giant paving package? But they were kind of thinking that it might be good for them, but not as good for Ellsworth, because we already have ones that are close enough to us. So wouldn't want to drive up our price anyways. But so that's kind of what some of the changes. The other changes that I've made, I reread all the TIF documents again. And you know, there was a few things in there I kind of stood at that are like, clearly we can use the surplus TIF funding, which is about 170,000 this year, with the debt service drop-offs of around 400,000 next year is even larger. You know, we need to table that conversation for a TIF reimagining. Maybe it goes more to Parks and Rec, maybe it goes to other things. But it felt like there's a few things that were specifically mentioned that's allowable use in the economic development TIF that I felt were, that we should, you know, to get closer to the 2.9% level, which I think is where we're just at now, was like the Mora's website requests and the marketing materials, those pieces, those are like, it's like, you know, explicitly stated in there that can be used for that, so, so we're gonna, we already made that change. And then to get us, what was the other changes that I made on these? There's a couple other ones where I felt like we could go, maybe we can bring up the SIP document. Signage for the advertising is in there. To me, the police sign, especially with the digital component, is 100% in line with what that TIF is allowing for. So I feel like we can also pull we haven't pulled it yet, I don't think, or did we already pull this one? The police sign for 15,000, what was it?
It's still in there.
So the police sign for 15,000, I feel we can pull into the TIF funding as well to reduce that FY '26 request by 15,000. This isn't relative to this because we're going to talk vehicles later, but it also mentioned an outside of district allowable uses for the TIF were public safety and public works vehicles, which is specifically called out as an allowable use of the TIF.
Who knew?
Well, yes
Well,
and no. So if
Go on.
the creation of the TIF creates more burden, say they need more police officers, they need more plows or fire trucks because it's created such an economic growth. So in that area, you could use another police officer or vehicle or fire truck or public works.
But it said outside of district on that, so that's where it's interesting, I've joked, it's kind of like trying to decipher the Constitution, but fortunately, we have the Founding Fathers here that can provide light, we don't need the Federalist Papers, we have a lot of that institutional knowledge here. So maybe we can table that, we're gonna talk vehicles later on, but
Yeah,
maybe
we'll-
Tammy, if you could review that.
Yep.
I think that would be good. I also feel like if we're still a little over 2.9%, I know that's a bit arbitrary, but I really feel like an inflation level area is with the Parks and Rec director, or we could use some of that staffing that is, a lot of community economic development. We could use some of that TIF money as a portion of that salary to do a further reduction there as well. There's a couple other smaller things that I feel like on a final pass of the budget, now that I have a lot better understanding of the TIFs and the details, there's like 3 amendments or 2 amendments. Some of them have like sticky notes on the copied and like with lines pointing. So it's very interesting documents to try to read and decipher. Also an interesting economic development history of like what the priorities of those councils from the 1990s on how those districts have grown, how their expectations for how those districts would grow. If you've just can't wait to spend an evening reading a couple hundred pages of 3 times revised TIF documentation. It's
wicked exciting.
We can get you help.
I love it.
Poor Ashley actually had to have an email
There are
from me.
things that are really
Was it this
cool.
morning or yes?
It was this morning.
This morning. Just like, I've had all these things like clearly usable from this TIF. We have the surplus. So also excited to move forward. I know I won't be here on Monday, but we have a memo on some of the TIF redesign. It's consultant and really getting that. That's the way it's done previously. I think it's going to be a great exercise for council to be like, we'll have a much better idea. Here's the TIF. Here's what it can be used for. Some of these things we would like to use it for, but we may have a modification for a few areas that are just critically important. Waterfront used to be on there, and then they got rid of the waterfront as like that you could build a river walk with it. It seemed to be the intent of that at some period in time, and then that priority changed. It was all crossed out. Maybe we want to bring back that conversation on using the TIF district portage was like a no-brainer to me. Like we gotta, there's a few things that we could use this TIF money for almost immediately if we just complete the deck. It all says you can use it here once you establish a TIF downtown Portage District, it's like, oh, okay, so we need to have maybe one meeting just so we can start using that money for our downtown. But to me, I think it'll be an interesting conversation with the Heart of Ellsworth and how you stagger this. Maybe we could go through some increased funding for them with some unallocated TIF now, but we design a new district, could we include the waterfront, and really like, it's supposed to feather off, and is that district or that group and the board kind of help increase the value of those areas? Some of it could be sheltered into the Heart of Ellsworth as an organizational subsidy, and we can pull back on the surplus, and maybe that's how you do it. There's, especially reading those documents, you can kind of layer that. There's all kinds of things about sinking funds and how you can pay with debt. I know that's not Steve's favorite method for these things, but for some of the larger capital assets that have been kicked the cans down the road, maybe that is a good way to reallocate some of these projects so you can actually
I'm
tackle.
not a TIF fan, period.
Oh, interesting. Well,
Curious, Charlie, as I look at the capital wish list, one of the largest items, the largest, is the library renovations. Did you learn anything about whether library improvements could be made, could be funded partially through a TIF?
they could be if we redesign them. I don't think that there's any.
Nothing in here.
But nothing currently?
Nothing current. I think we did get the phase one request in for congressionally directed spending, so we'll see
Good, we'll see what happens.
what moves forward. I feel like there's a little bit of a, let's see what happens there. And then we'll have to, it's such a critical asset for us, we'll have to
Yeah,
start looking at that a little more.
okay.
And then, what was the other big things with capital? I just wanted to confirm reading the tea leaves, it seems like generally okay with the manager's recommendation. I'm not hearing no to putting the sign into to the TIF funding. The tanker 4, we're gonna bring back for a much more immediate kind of first priority for future ban bond discussion, and as well as the track. That seems to be like the next immediate priority. Bringing the noted, if you go up to the top there, the excavator, the trench box, and the camera, and the 2 balers, we'll look, again, this isn't decided here now, we'll look to amend the ban bond surplus funds on that to cover those capital items. There's an additional match within our water, wastewater, and a few of those that would move forward, but we'll have that larger discussion at a future council meeting, probably, maybe at the May meeting, Mike, if we can get the documentation put together.
Charlie, just a quick clarification on the sidewalk plow per our conversations earlier.
Yeah, and I think
Got it
that,
For
I think that,
general fund fiscal year '26?
I was thinking the ban bond surplus funds, there was enough for
Okay,
it
it's hard to
there.
tell with the alignment where that landed. Okay.
Yeah, I think we can bring that actually, we'll put it back into the manager's yes now, but we'll call it a council yes for ban bond.
So instead of future, it's in fiscal year '26?
Well, it's not gonna be in fiscal year '26, it'll still be in the surplus ban bond. I don't really think we'd wanna put that into the, that would be definitely a lot more than 2.9%, so. But I'd put it in the surplus ban bond from this previous ban bond.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But I think in a lot of ways, the track and that, establishing new funding for that and the ban bond there is kind of the real big priority. I'll have to start talking to Amy. I know they want it for the fall, I believe, is when they'd really like to start getting some traction there.
Talking to Josh Frost from the school athletic department, he said if they heard relatively soon that it looked like it was going forward, they could get somebody by the end of August, it could be finished, if they let their people know right now. That was his assessment.
We're not gonna be able to let them know right now, but I think maybe I'll really try to fast track this to get some additional funding authorization. Yeah, and we've talked to our highway department actually today on that. We could have, it's looking like early winter could be the start of the construction road piece, but maybe as our other big project would be to demo some of the existing area with the excavator. Nate and team, has good expertise there to try to reduce, and then we hiring out for the creation of the road. I think it's like, they mentioned it was like a 4-layer process that has to go through, so maybe we can get a little reduced cost. And then also, as Amy and I talked about, generally, we were thinking a third city, a third a school, on a future bond ban, that wouldn't hit the city budgets until FY '27. But then also looking towards some fundraising too. It's a good project for that type of thing that Amy and I could work together to try to reduce overall taxpayer costs on that.
That's how it was actually built in the first place, was fundraising,
Oh,
years and years ago, but
Do you remember what ratio was private fundraising?
now I can't, that was, gosh, probably 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. I helped out with it, but I can't remember.
He told me the year they found a record, it
I
was.
thought it was in 1999.
Earlier, it was
Okay.
like 38 years ago, 37 or 38.
Yeah, 86, 87, yeah.
Charlie, before we, this is helpful, the thought I have is, I guess, the question I have is, we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So some of this is being pushed to, TIF funds can cover, some of this can be, ban bond 2020 next year, which would eventually be in the fiscal year '27, probably bonded, So, I guess the question I have is, and I don't need an answer right now, is there a way before we vote to pass the budget where you can do any kind of forecasting on, like, I know that's what SIP planning is, so, I mean, I guess, and I don't want to ask for too much, that's just a thought I've had, is like, we're saying, well, this year, this and this, tool and that tool.
Yeah.
And that all sounds good, and I like us focusing on the 2.9, I think it's a great target. I just don't want it next year to be 27.9, right? And I don't think that's what you're gonna, and I know you're not going for that, but
Yeah.
I think just for, some general, high-level kind of, here's, if there's any kind of something you could provide or finance could provide.
Yeah, and I think Michelle mentioned this I think maybe we'll add that to the next steps on just the debt schedule. I know we have one in here, but, Nate and Ashley and I can work on a memo in a couple weeks of the last meeting on this, to kind of pencil in, sure, this isn't the actual debt schedule, we haven't gone out to ban or bond for these things, but we can make general assumptions on, in red, based on these recommendations, this is our current debt schedule, this is how we'd feather in likely, based on a 2027 with, this ban bond would hit, and 2028, just kind of factor those in as if they'd gone out. That shouldn't be too difficult to provide, so you can see that aspect.
Yeah, and I just want to, I have complete faith in you in the finance department that, you guys are thinking about these things and working through, but, it would be, that type of exercise, I think, would be really helpful to just provide a little bit of context as we're approaching the vote for this year's budget.
Right. And then if you see something, maybe we pull a couple $100,000 additional into this cycle, it might pull us
Yeah,
over
yeah.
2.9%, but this is pretty critical, and it's gonna hit.
Yeah, we don't want to, yeah.
And making a little more of a data-driven decision. And to your point too, yeah, that's, everything else, I mean, we have a much larger depreciating asset, Pump House Point, there's just thing after thing after thing that needs to be looked at, but a much more data-driven SIP plan that will also be a recommendation for us to move forward with a consultant for that, to really lock those in. It needs to be now that over the next 6 months that we have that updated TIF plan, we have that updated SIP plan. And now with this great updated budget book, it's transparent and much more trackable. And those other pieces, we're gonna be in a lot better shape, so.
That's great, thank you.
I apologize for being late. Because we were going to start out with Larry. Did I miss that?
We held it.
Nope, we haven't.
We didn't do
Just
that
been
too.
chit-chatting.
Just,
And this is great timing. I think, is Larry in here? Yep. I think, let's bring him in. We got Cap.
Hey, oh, did you? Oh, hey, Larry.
And I was listening to your question at the last workshop, and you basically were, well, I can explain it this way. If we hit the 5% increase in total value, that's going to get us up to 1.6 billion, roughly. Of that, I've determined that from looking at building permit values, and you and Tammy probably remember I use a floating 25, 75, 25, 25% of the cost on the building permit for anything this year since January, 75% of what was all last year, and then actually 25% of that cost of permits the previous year in 2023. And that seems to work very, very well. You know, it is just an estimate, but it works extremely well, it seems, maybe too well. But that total new construction value that I see this year would be about 21 million. And if you compare 21 million to 1.6 billion, it's about 1.3%, which any new value helps taxpayers. Certainly if we had a 5% of all new construction value versus any adjustment based on market increase, that would be much better because it spreads, you get the total value and you spread it around to everyone. But that new value, new construction value, they get hit with all that. It's brand new construction. So, yeah, about
So-
1.3.
So of the 5% that you're talking, you're thinking about a little over 1% of that is gonna be new construction?
Well, it's, let's see here. I actually did tax rate levy and valuation comparisons, and last year we had 26.8 million for a levy, 1.536 for a billion for total value, with a tax rate of 17.45. If we use that same 26.8 million levy, which we're not, and divide that by the new increase in total value, which is the 1.613 billion, that would get us down to, if, you know, a no change in the levy, no increase at all, would get the tax rate down to 16.61. If we increase the levy by the estimated, I think we're at 3.5% now, right, roughly as we speak.
2.9 maybe.
Well, it's the target.
Yeah,
but-
Yeah.
We're close to it right now.
2.9 is, well, I was watching last week.
That's all right, yeah.
And it was roughly, I think, 3.5, and that would be up to, the levy would be up to 27.73 million divided by 1.613 billion. That would give us a tax rate of 17.2. And so it's,
What is it called?
Can I ask you just a question, Larry? I'm sorry. So you're talking with the 5% would get us at 1.6 billion.
yeah,
Okay, so what is the value that you're saying, what is the value of just the dollar value of that new construction?
yeah, it's 21 million, and the difference would be from 1.536 last year to 1.613. So who does math in their head? I thought I had this computed
Can't see
here.
that stupid screen. 1612691,359 is with the minus 1535. Can you see that, Tammy?
Yeah.
Can you subtract that valuation out for me?
1.613 minus 1.536.
It's like 100,000.
How much? 500?
100, I thought. The less tax revenue. It's $21 million in increased valuation to the
21 is new construction.
new construction.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not the,
So the 5%, the 1,612 minus the 1,535, that's up there that I can't quite see the number.
1,535,896,532.
76, almost 77 million.
77 million.
Minus the 21 million.
minus the 20, okay, that's what I was trying to get to. So,
It's
so
50
there's
55, 56.
$56
Or
million
55.8,
in new
55.8.
taxes
So that's gonna be,
For new.
So
It's
that's
like
for new valuation.
increased depreciation of existing buildings.
it's like 250, you can actually,
60,
how much did you say in new tax, in new?
65.
21 million.
65 and 12 roughly.
Okay.
What's that, 77? Yeah, 21 million of 77 million,
So it's 56 million in new value.
yeah.
You could plug it into the 26.
So that's,
What do you need to do?
it's,
It's 67 million new
21
value,
by
it's,
I think it's around 26%.
thank you.
I do remember having that figure, I just didn't put it in my,
26% of our
Print.
increase in value
Yeah,
is
like
from
New
growth,
construction.
New construction.
yeah.
I'm just trying to think of that in dollar terms, in terms of like new tax revenue based on current mill for $67 million in increased
Yeah.
value is probably like 240,000, I want to say off the top. Because we did the 24 million, kicked off like 110,000, so that should kick off a couple 100,000.
So, every little bit helps. But yeah, it's, when those property owners who have the new construction, of course, will be hit with the full, but the others, the 5% increase it's in the total value. Individual properties won't be hit, every one of them at 5%. Some will be lower, some will be higher. But the average, in getting to the total value, it's estimated will be 5% above last year's total value.
Because that's, I mean, and that's what you get to. Everyone's gonna be like that, because it's not gonna be across the board. I mean, 5% of 400,000 is a lot more than 5% of 100,000
Yeah.
for an increase. So
Yeah.
that's why I hate those across the board things, not just, for that reason, but,
Yeah.
So.
It is progressive.
It's not, it's never equal. There's just no such thing
Yeah.
as being able to raise taxes equally across the board.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was just trying to,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get down to how much is actually, are we raising the taxes outside of new value? I mean, if you increase the value of your house, then your taxes go up automatically anyway, whether we increase the budget or not.
Well, yeah, unless
So that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
you had enough new growth to supersede that, and then your mill would go down, and you could potentially see a net increase or a flat.
So long as the new growth doesn't add to your municipal costs.
Right.
A helpful metric to look at, we have that graph of 200,000, 300,000 upward valuation of your home and
If you
how
go
much-
down, we might be able to figure out a different way to structure this too, and maybe have two graphs, but, so if you go to your calculators and you can, I think we sent you guys a link to a version of this, that you can change those percentages and then see how they affect the different valuated
If
houses.
you could also incorporate assumed this much new growth that's not you, and see how much yours would then go down.
Yeah, we should be able to separate that out
What percentages?
at the end, and I think that's kind of the next, I'm gonna review some of the other council discussions around Maine that have gotten a lot more detail in the valuation on, here's where we're at versus like the state thresholds for what they have us valued at and what we're at now, and, like I mentioned, Brewer, they dialed back, I think it was a 10+% valuation increase, and they ended up less than, for some of the reasons you stated, Michelle. So how do we structure that conversation? How do we have that data? The other thing, just even hearing that, like we can figure out that valuation increase that will equate to a certain level of dollars that is increased tax revenue, and we could just plug that in if you go up again. If that new 60+ million in valuation adds a couple $100,000, we can adjust, just plug that into adjustment amount, and you can see like, okay, that 2.9% of that new, for the existing property owners, they're actually not gonna see 2.9, they're gonna see this.
Yeah, I think you can actually have another column that says for the person without the new value, it's 76%.
Yep.
Not. of the 5% increase. Something like that, just so we can figure out what it is that, what is it that we're actually asking the taxpayers to increase.
And of course, just from a citizen, I live here in Ellsworth, pay taxes here in Ellsworth, and just as a citizen, I appreciate the board, Charlie and everyone, really focusing on how to get the taxes down. It's still an increase, but it's fantastically better than in years past, and it's really appreciated.
Nice to
Thank
hear.
you. Charlie's right when he says, when you go years without any tax increase, you're gonna, at some point, I mean, you have inflation, and it just costs more money. It costs more money to run a business. Businesses have to charge more for things because, you know, of employment and cost of goods and things like that. It's the same thing with a municipality.
Yeah.
You can't run a municipality and not ever have any increases, you know, especially when there's such a large request for new services all the time, and protection and things like that, but also there's, you know, employment and our costs for all of our buildings, and to pave a road and to do all of that costs more money. Highways, sand, every year, you know, just to get someone to do the, what do you call it, when you, not raking, but when they,
Oh, Grady?
yeah, and things like that, it's just like, it costs more money, you know, anything that we ask to do, so, but it's much easier, I think, more palatable, a little bit every year than when you get $1,000 increase in your bill in 1 year. That's kind of hard to take.
Yeah, and I would say to your point, Patrick, on kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, let's say we do those new value, there's a little bit of a dial back in the, you know, okay, wow, it's actually like a 0.5% increase, but we're gonna see some more debt service later on.
Mhm.
To me, one of the things to kind of avoid that in the future that I would love structurally to change is like, maybe that's like a rainy day fund situation, like, okay, and we're also going to allocate X. Because in an ideal world, if the economy, you know, changes, or there's some big structural shift, I think, was it Orne? No. It was a town that, Old Town, just lost like a single mill. And now, like, they're either gonna have to fire half of the staff, and even that's not, it's like, or it's gonna be like, you know, 50%, I mean, they're just making that number, but it was a massive number increase in the taxes, because they lost. So now, Ellsworth is much more diversified of an economy than that, you know, and also I think we have pressures like, you know, these Walmarts and Home Depots and doing pretty good. Those are the categories for us that are, you know, $300,000+ in taxes every year they kick off to the economy. So I don't think we have quite the vulnerabilities, but you never know what can come around. And I know Bucksport did a great job of planning for their mill closures, socking away funds for that piece. So I could see, or in this case too, maybe some of the things that I've done to pull off things that qualify for TIF, we put back in here, and we hold a larger amount of reserve in TIF, so we can think about how to spend that once we've had more time to really redesign that to current economic development needs. Sure, these things are all qualified, quantifiable, but let's see where we're end up to. If it's, you know, I was saying coming in here in the reverse, that there's a little bit of leeway on maybe on the Parks and Rec director if we went that route, that we could subsidize some of that salary. But this, where we're looking at now, hearing about the new growth, I think we'll be in a pretty close to inflationary level for the taxpayer. So.
Oh,
Just while you're still up there, I know we saw a graph early on in budget season, I can't quite remember, but that 21 million new development, how does that relate to, or compare to previous years, like over the last 5 years or so?
I don't have that from previous years. I can look into that and get you that.
Be curious. Did you create a graph that we saw early on, or were we just looking
Total
at
valuation
taxation?
comparison of last year.
Yeah, no,
But it didn't
no, there's a
break
value,
away.
there's valuation in the ellsworthmaine.gov/budget. Yes, there's the hockey stick.
Right.
You see that, yeah,
I
if you
didn't
go
know
to.
if that's directly related to that new yearly construction growth, or?
Yeah, I think some of it's just due to how,
This is just showing that's our total value.
oh, it's in your book.
Page
Yeah.
11.
That also brings us to the other question, Larry, because I know that there was a massive increase, it seems like, from last year to this year in the state valuation for Ellsworth. All of a sudden, there was this big jump. Did they explain where that new value is coming from? It's not just the value of property, because hasn't jumped that much. So I was shocked that it was that much. I've never seen it do that big of a jump in 1 year.
Yeah, they're always almost like 2 years behind with how they come into their final figure.
Okay.
Yeah, so with the increases of
So that would have been 23.
prior years.
I
Yeah.
would have thought that jump would have been like 21 and 22 when everyone was buying up the property from COVID and everything, but I just.
Maybe that's some of the lag too. The graph shows, this is the state valuation. You're starting FY '21, goes from 1.1 billion to FY '25 is, a little over 1.5 billion. So you have this, it's a pretty significant, and the previous years are just, you have a 2009 to 2020, it's like this, and then hockey stick.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and we see that in the TIF revenue, right? That TIF district, wow, that's producing 170,000 more per year in that TIF district, just, just an increased valuation.
We haven't had that much growth,
No.
I'm surprised at,
Well,
It's only
it's
21
the assessed values divided by sale price, is how they do that, based on sales. And I haven't been trying to keep assessed values anywhere close to 100%, on average.
yeah.
Primarily because I thought we'd see a recession during one of these past 2 or 3 years, and then things would drop. So we're probably, as of right now, because we're still getting increases in market value, we're probably below 85% assessed value on average compared to purchase price. And so I made 1 year of a pretty significant adjustment, but I think the last 2 years have been less than, because I was thinking, man, if we hit a recession, we don't want assessed values to be above market value for properties.
Yeah.
I think I went down a very strange rabbit hole one weekend on looking at all of the cities and towns, because I was like, wow, this might be a great little news nugget on this is the biggest increase in, but it did have a, in areas like Bar Harbor, Mount Desert, this whole region, other places in southern Maine, like you could see that it really followed a lot of that kind of COVID growth trend, which is such a weird thing to think about, that COVID hits, seems like a pandemic, what a weird way to raise valuations through a massive, terrible pandemic. But it did. It had 600 million or 500 million and growing. And the decisions that those people made in Acadia and a lot of ways drove that too, on just to make that land a publicly national park with 4 million. In the pandemic, people started changing their habits of going to Europe and other vacations and coming up here more. And they like it. This little amazing part of Maine, and it's really increased a lot of property value, it seems like. How much the short-term rental market plays into that too, in terms of valuation increase. I don't know, Larry, if they get to that level of specificity with state analysis of valuation, but.
The state doesn't even, but it's all sale prices compared to the assessed value. And they really don't get into the transient Airbnbs and things.
That's a tool we may have in the next couple of years to use.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really should, because
There's a bill for that.
always is.
Well, although, again, conversations with Robert, he's looking at ways to differentiate between short-term rental commercial and residential use. It can be done.
Yeah, that would be, Robert's not here tonight, but that would be, there would be a way, there's software out there that tracks Airbnbs and Vrbo and
Yeah.
those types of things, and can provide data. But it would be You know, you may have one, we may have the same house side by side, exactly alike, same land, same location, everything is the same. We have the same assessed value. But I'm Airbnb, you're not. You can, but you just decided not to. So who has the higher value if you can do it just like I can do it?
I think a conversation for another meeting.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
and Michelle, it was actually my wife, because I was doing all, she sent me this from Maine Biz. Yeah, Maine ranks number 1 in the nation for the largest increase in the median home price in the past 5 years. The median home price in 2019, $219,000, increased 78.5% over to $391,000. I think areas like Ellsworth, you know, that factor is, yeah, that's probably a big driver of why you see the hockey
I
stick
see the
growth.
hockey stick, yeah.
Yeah, I think Hancock County rates as, if not the first highest of all the counties, second. It's either first or second.
And we'll see if there's a main, potential Bangor Daily News article. We've done some interviews and had some data stories on just growth in the city, the 150 units, went through planning board, the 36, those are market rate, the 150, the 36 at subsidized rate for people who will afford houses, the Dice Arts, the Home to Suites, you know, that's pretty significant investments that are definitely coming, and some that, you know, some of those still already on capital, and some other, their phase projects potentially, and but as those start to come online over future years, these numbers for new could increase even more, so hopefully they do. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you all very much.
I don't need to call you now. I was gonna call him for-
And we'll head back to administration on the big board piece if we could, just a couple areas, I think. If we could pull up that spreadsheet, is Nate gonna pull that up? Great. First was the Parks and Rec director proposal. I know we talked about it that night, there didn't seem to be a lot of, hey, I don't think we should do this. I know it seemed generally supportive, but just wanted to confirm. You know, we pre-funded it for around $45,000 in the budget last year as a council decision, but decided to sort of hold off on making that decision for another year, or to that another year now. We factored in the, if we could zoom in a little bit on that, and go, and we put in Public Works. The Parks and Rec, even with benefits, even with the $45,000 pre-funded from last year, when you factor in the benefits, the FY26 cost of that is $86,000. That's already in the budget, I should say. That's the whites that are managed recommendations are already in there. That'd be a cost savings of around that amount. If we pulled it out, I think I'd like to consider an expanded department at a future date, potentially, on that could include buildings and grounds and TIF funding, but that's, you know, I feel like this is a good start. Let's get somebody as a director in that can really help design that department, and it's a much needed piece for the city that is already outlined in my memos, but wanted to make sure that there was no other questions before we lock that into a council recommendation.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
Couldn't even begin to read that.
You're welcome.
I still feel very good about it,
Okay.
just for me.
The yellow's the yes,
Sorry, the whites are already in the budget manager recommendation. The yellows weren't a manager recommendation, but I pulled out the departmental request. The last time for the council meeting, to rehash, I think we can take the yellows, we'll, you know, remain the manager recommendation, but we'll bring the half a police officer, we're gonna bring that, per the last discussion, to a white. It's only gonna be about a addition of 10,000, because we were gonna bring the dispatch position to, you know, going out to hire on that at the half-year levels, so it kind of reduces the full impact here.
Okay, so that stuff's not showing that we talked about last
yeah,
time.
it's not updated yet.
No,
We took
the
the fire vehicle, we were gonna.
fire vehicles table, that's not in the budget. Before you were here, Michelle, we just had we talked about the
Sorry.
tabling. No, that's all right, we talked about tabling, and Tammy and I are a bit of a disagreement thus far on TIF funding. There is this mention of a public safety vehicles and public works vehicles that could be funded outside the TIF district, but unfortunately, we have the writer of the Constitution with us, so.
Yeah, That's stretching it.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read this little piece so you understand?
I don't want you to embarrass me on television. Actually, Bill, why don't you read it? Let's see it, yeah.
Okay.
Now granted, some
Out of
of,
district but related investments, capital equipment, investment in public safety and public work vehicles and equipment are needed to address the business services needed of in-district business development growth. The cost of vehicles and equipment will be prorated dependent upon the usage in the TIF district. So for example, we had a bunch of sidewalks up on Myrick Street, and we needed an extra sidewalk plow up there. You could use that specifically because it's gonna be used 100%. Or if you're gonna use it 50% downtown and 50% up there, you could prorate it at 50%.
gotcha, so we could
So-
prorate the sidewalk plow as,
We don't have, we don't
New
have a
sidewalks up
sidewalk
there.
up there.
but we would, first we'd have to put new sidewalks up there.
Do we need to prorate the sidewalk paver?
Or if we have just
Make
one
the-
And the
police
paper.
cruiser that goes around in
Okay,
a
so-
circle all day long in the, on Myrick Street.
Gotcha,
Has to be
gotcha.
used in the district or
Yes.
Or prorated.
Or prorated for that.
It has
Gotcha.
to be, the purchase is for the district, but can be used outside the district, but it's prorated.
Yes.
That was one of the other things, Michelle, there's a few things that are like relative to downtown investments that are pretty applicable there, but you need to do the second piece I think you talked about of establishing the downtown Portage District. Once that triggers in, there's a bunch of other things that you could start using it for, but we'll talk about that much more later.
Yeah. There's so much that we can do. Once we pass this budget and we're comfortable with it, there are so many things that we can immediately start on to start working towards next year's budget and to be able to have a better understanding for next year and where we're putting it, how we're gonna start immediately on, not on asking people to do their budgets, but thinking about what's not in this budget that is gonna need to be in there and what you're estimating for the other increases are going to be and what we're thinking about. And that's when you can start your planning immediately for that. Looking at your debt service and then also much more long-term, 5 years. That's the good stuff. That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets, right, Tim?
And sticky notes.
And sticky notes, yeah. My two favorite things.
Great, so I'll move forward with just no changes on the, again, it's already in the budget and the benefits were calculated prior to, so there won't be a change there. Second piece too, again, a manager's recommendation, the administrative side of things was performance-based pay. I put 58,000 here as the potential savings if the council decided to not go with that. 92,000 is the cost, the reason it's 58,000 is 92,000 is the cost of a 2.9% COLA. Now that we have a new performance review process, a rubric and a scoring mechanism and timelines for that. I did notice that we do have merit pay is allowable in the charter, but it's not COLAs, but we've been doing COLAs. I mean, it doesn't say you can't do COLAs, but it's specific for merit, but there wasn't really a system for it. So now we have a system to kind of lock it in. Yeah, you really have to have the pay component. It's sort of, it pushes your employees to demand like that their performance review is done so that they're COLA or more are eligible. The other reason it's an increase over COLA, the 2.9% I feel is important, is, we've seen a lot of turnover in staff, 20% turnover the year before I arrived. We were at 12% when I started, by the end of the year, we could be closer towards 15 and continue to make those investments in staff I think are really important. And if we stayed at the COLA level and went to a merit-based system, inherently, there'd be a large group of employees that would get less than COLA because, ideally, we've talked to our attorney about this, we've established a structure, I've already talked to Lorena, our HR specialist, she would head up kind of this system. Sure, we have the performance reviews, but we probably had to have a system of council involvement on, how we distribute the additional funds towards merit. In an ideal world, 40 to 60% of the organization is in that meets expectation category and is getting around a COLA. And then you're at 25 to 35 in the exceeds expectation, which could be COLA plus 1.5 to 2.5% additional, and then potentially up to 10 to 15% in the highly exceeds expectations, which would be 3 to 5%. But also that this is a sliding scale, though. You wouldn't necessarily have to expend all 150. That's sort of the limit. You might want to carry that forward to a new cycle depending on pay. But to me that can really help. With the organizations now that we have a performance review system in process, really put the the incentives in the right place to really honor people who are making above and beyond contributions to the city and keeping them around. As Governor Baker once told me, people are policy in organizations, and you hire great people if you can keep them, and the ones that are most, just mission-driven and just like this, they're gold in private sector. I know, Steve, we've talked about that too, and your dedication towards employees and keeping those turnover rates lower and the high cost of high turnover. And to me, this was a really important one for us, so. Any questions on that one? The next one's a smaller piece, but just kind of a miss that now that we have a little more time, wanted to put in. We've also talked in HR about an intern system, and we have a good candidate to be a summer intern. We've had some initial conversations with the Rue Institute at Northeastern for a potential rotation of kind of more of a high level, maybe analytics folks that could be on bigger assignments, but interns are never free. They take staff time. And there's also around a $2,000 potential licenses for emails and Office 365 equipment, et cetera. So for a potential fall, spring, and winter intern, or sorry, summer, fall, and spring intern, around budgeting around $6,000 additional dollars there to fund that project. So, any questions on that one?
Can you break that down again? So it's maybe 2,000 in licensing fees, 4,000 goes to stipends for their supervisors?
No, 2,000 in the licensing equipment, those types of fees. So 2,000 per. So if we're going to do 3 interns for the year, it's about $6,000
Okay,
bucks. So
all right,
2,000
I was
for
not
the
following that.
yeah.
So that's proposed cut?
A proposed addition. So we would add that into.
Oh, you're proposing to add that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I should say that the yellow is really, it's not in the budget yet.
Okay.
The original version we had of this was based on the manager's recommendation, but that's there.
So if there are 3, but they cycle through, can't they just use the same licensing and the same equipment?
I think the next year, we might be able to, once we buy those laptops, and we'll have 3 intern laptops around.
But they're only one at a time, right?
Oh, yeah, actually. Sorry, Nancy.
And the licensing, if you put intern at, then it's the same person, the same equipment, it just cycles through.
Yeah, I think we can do less than that. Let me make sure.
So that would be 2,000 instead of 6?
Just 2,000 for the whole program. There might be some other costs with travel and other pieces.
Even if you do 2,500?
Yeah, we can do that down to 2,500.
Okay.
Seems a good investment
Do you need
in
a-
HR.
Oh, I'm writing on Nancy's thing again.
I know, this is my notebook.
We need the blocker. I think-
Get the red pens out, we're gonna use the line.
Yeah, although Ashley's keeping the change log. I don't know what I'm doing here. We got, she's already got it.
Patrick, were you adding value here while we went?
Oh, I just, it seems for that, it's just
Oh.
relatively small cost, and if it's a value to the HR department.
But we're just talking about a better way of accounting the same costs.
Oh, yeah, no,
So
so it's a win-win.
All right, so you were supporting the
Pay less
2,500?
but I think the value, yeah, I
Yeah.
would support, especially 2,500 for 3 interns,
Yep.
that's bang for your buck, for sure.
The other piece is not the biggest part of the budget, as I kind of gave direction to staff. We're not doing additional FTEs except for Parks and Rec, which seemed to be a big demand this year. This is going to be a leaner year. Most of the staff held to that. There are some obvious examples of others that did not up here, and one of which, though, was made it in, and it was almost a no on the manager request, but Jim and Sarah really kind of put together the data on the maintenance position, which I agreed with in principle, but just really had a no additional FTEs this year mindset. But when you really put down, and we discussed this last time around, you see the math on the 30+ thousand we're spending at the police station for cleaning services, the 20,000 we're spending in City Hall, the less as much on Knowlton Park, and Erkey for, it's a pretty high cost we're already spending on vendors for these pieces, and Knowlton Park needs more year-round maintenance. It's not just the summer season that people are using that park, and we had lots of reports of trash, and City Hall, as we've noted, not a lot of hours are being spent cleaning this place. It gets an enormous amount of traffic. There's been complaints from staff, and I think I've heard some mentions from public too on kind of the cleaning condition. I know that a maintenance person used to be in operation at City Hall, so it's kind of a return of a position as an FTE too. And when you do the financials, that's adds about 24,000 to the budget. That's already in there. Again, this wouldn't, that's what I already put in there. That includes benefits, and that's adds an additional 2,000 hours of cleaning services to the city for that position, so.
Related to that position, we thought maybe, because they'd have to be traveling around so much, there was the discussion of a vehicle. That's not part of that number that would be?
It's not, although we did add, the other thing was when we did the math on what bringing in a person, we wrote another two things is that we'd be creating collision with their potential supervisor, Jim, our maintenance facilities director. So we need to budget and a bump for him so that he's not making, less than the person that we hire. Plus, almost everybody else will be in that merit-based category. That's how we're gonna buy the data to define the rules. But I think there's Jim, as we've all seen, this guy's one of the hardest working people in show business, and he'll have new management responsibilities, which would, as I say, you do good work, you'll get more work, and you'll get paid for more work. With this additional supervising responsibilities, all his great work here, an additional upgrade now, I think is, at the start of the fiscal year, of course, and budgeted in here outside of the performance-based system seemed worthwhile. But to your second point, vehicles, yes, Jim also mentioned that, and cleaning supplies. Those vendors come with their own, we probably have some of those remaining here, from when there was a previous position, but we'll, probably need to factor in that as well for some additional cleaning supplies added to in the lease, and I don't think I can TIF that one out. I didn't say anything about vehicles. So maybe at the vehicle conversation, I'll dial in that additional cleaning supplies as well. I know Tabitha talked about the Parks and Rec director maybe needing a vehicle. Again, I'm kind of in like maybe a shared vehicle aspect so we can see how much usage is here, and kind of a recommendation. I think Tabitha, and I don't want to speak for her, but we did have a conversation after it. It kind of depends on the Parks and Rec person we get to. I think if it's a person who's like in the weeds, doing the activities in other places, if we have somebody that's coming in, it's more on the programmatic, building the organization, working with Jim and our facilities folks and our public works teams to kind of do, maybe they won't need to be driving around here, there, and everywhere. Maybe they could just get by with more of a checkout system on cars out here when they're going around, so that's kind of where I'm leaning on that, but we'll talk more in the vehicle conversation in a couple weeks. Besides that, Michelle, just to give you a quick update on the capital improvement, the police HQ sign, that was definitely in sort of the advertising signage part of the TIF stuff that was mentioned, that I felt like we could bring that into TIF funding, especially that like digital sign up there so that the city can announce meetings and other pieces. I also just don't like the idea of having a police sign with Jim's hot dog stand below it, so feel like that was very much in line with the TIF piece. And then coming down to the last piece on the legislative side of things, so we added the 4350 to come up to the potential next council could vote on to increase the stipends a bit. And then we added 2,000 for travel, conferences, for the council to, Sarah and I got a notification at MCTMA, Maine City and Town Managers Association Conference, councilors could maybe come to that, and I know over the last year we've just been budget and putting out fires and doing these pieces, but now I think it's, it's time to start being a little more external and getting better policies from everywhere else and hopefully offering that to the council. So we thought that was at the right range to add, but it's your budget, so didn't want to add that. Maybe you think that's too much. Maybe we were at 500 for the conferences before, right, Ashley? It was just 500 for like conferences, and I felt that that's not going to really cover enough council activity related to that.
So that says travel, but do you mean conferences?
Yeah, I thought,
We combined it under conferences and meetings, but it's gonna be travel and your conference.
The total travel and to the whole thing is
Yeah.
2,000.
travel,
Yeah.
conferences.
It's just gonna be under one
Nate's fixing
GLI.
it now.
Is that better?
Yeah, it looks good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine adding that for us as long as we then use it,
Yep.
if we're gonna do it. We can maybe, part of our strategic discussions over the summer, maybe it's identifying what what these are and, seeing, having a plan for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy and I both went to Biddeford for that.
Main downtown center.
Main downtown center thing. I didn't think to do it, but, we have a very active council. I think I don't think $2,000 at 70 cents a mile and meals and things, that'll be used up.
The four of us were at the League of
Yeah, we
Towns
were
last
Yeah,
night.
that's
in
true.
Northeast Harbor last night.
Yeah, I'm never expensing that stuff. I probably should, but I did that meeting with you all down in Biddeford as well.
Yeah,
But
I know, you don't think about it, but.
if we had that, that car for checkout though, I'd probably be okay. It's not being used. There's a car available down there. Let's all carpool over together. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's the hassle of the actually submitting the receipts. It just, but that's not a good excuse to not be reimbursed. Okay, does any other have on some of the bigger requests here? I know we're gonna circle back. I did want to kind of leave something open, just I know vehicles was kind of the main, seemed like the decision point on some of the public works discussion, but was there anything in public works? We talked solid waste last time around. We're gonna continue to look into that. I mentioned, Michelle, that we pulled back about 100,000 of the estimation for increasing sticker revenue or other revenues there. I just felt like, we could add potentially 100,000 in revenue, but not 200,000. That was a little bit too much of a hope. So I dialed that back, put that in the budget. But was there any other questions on solid or public
Is
works?
solid waste, are you meeting again before we end the budget in May? Do you know?
We don't have a date.
We were gonna
yet.
I know, Tammy, you had requested a meeting to look at what we wanna do for the analysis on it, but, yeah, we're open to doing whatever you guys want as far as getting together for meetings.
I think it would be good to get not that I want you to have more meetings, but just to have you review that budget yourselves and make a recommendation for any changes if there are any, or.
Yeah, I had
So,
asked
yeah.
Mike if we could meet to kind of go over an analysis, to kind of give us some options and look at all the pieces together.
Yep.
And so we just need to, yeah,
Amanda's gonna reach out.
okay.
And now that we're not gonna do the budget.
But if you wanna do a solid waste committee, we can do your meeting and then do the solid waste committee too.
Because I think the
Afterwards.
solid waste committee needs to look at that analysis
Yeah.
as well to make a recommendation to the council.
So we'll do your meeting and then we'll do a solid waste.
One question I have on that is where we landed on, were we going to eliminate residential drop-off at the waste station?
I hope so.
Well,
So you nodded yes, and you said, I hope.
No,
or-
I mean,
not
you meant for the
yet.
scales,
The scales, the
For the
residential
scales.
scales.
That's,
yeah.
Or we also discussed maybe a minimum amount.
well, and that's very different about, there are people that, I don't understand it, but that they do enjoy bringing their own garbage, so it may be a
Well, yeah, they're
minimum.
getting a
Rather
pretty good
than
discount.
eliminating, just having that conversation. I'm not sure where we
We
landed.
needed more
but-
analysis.
Yeah.
We talked about we could increase it, put a minimum, we could
Right.
increase the sticker, but the real question was, what do we want, what do we want the future of solid waste to look like?
Right.
Do we want to push people to the scales or to the bags more, and start from there and figure out how to
Yeah.
do it based on what we want? We just didn't.
Yeah, that feels unresolved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would come back to council at a council meeting, because we'd need to vote on it and look at the ordinance to see if there's any changes in there that need to be made as well.
Right, but it
'Cause-
factors into the budget as well with what you're anticipating.
Yeah, I don't understand why we're spending as much money we are on billing people for a dollar.
Well, the way we're doing it has to end, I
Yeah.
agree. But it's whether,
So-
again, is it a minimum? Is there a better way to do it at the station?
Yeah, no, my
Right.
recommendation is to stop doing residential, but if you wanna do a minimum, we can do whatever you want. It's not
So-
my,
But those changes could happen outside of the budget.
It could.
Yes.
And the equipment that we would need to do the other big changes would also need to be bonded.
and to your point, Nancy, I think in some ways, relative to the budget, this is my recommendation on the revenue increase, is, a guess. And maybe having the solid waste committee and Mike kind of one more time to maybe look at those numbers too and be like, okay, this is what we decided, that's the intent in some ways, is to raise that much additional revenue this year. That's less of a metric. How could you do that? So it's not necessary,
Okay.
I think it will be difficult for anybody looking at this to dial into, like, we changed, as Sarah's the elasticity of demand, like how we change this in a way that's appropriate and does it increase revenue. David Soper, who's we picked up from Blue Hill, is, he was great when he was here last time. It was one of the first things that aha to me when he came up. He's like, I don't know, Charlie, you want to raise that sticker, you may lose less, you might get more people doing other things. So I think this one's going to be, we got to get on it. We're losing a fair amount of funds. But yeah, being able to nail exactly our revenue projection this year, I think is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I think it is, but it'd be great to have a recommendation and to know, instead of just saying, well, we're just gonna keep it as it is and then work on it. If the solid waste committee, if you guys could just do an analysis and let us know what you think and what's gonna be coming up. Because that also would be in, what are we gonna do in 2026 for bond and debt service and all of that stuff, but.
So I would make a request on at least giving me a date by which we need to get this information to you guys. I don't know what you're looking at for more meetings, and I know they're kind of fluid right now, but if we're gonna try and get this analysis before you actually vote on the budget, then I need to make sure we meet that timeline.
Yeah,
I wouldn't worry as much about those stickers, because what people don't like to pay for is what you find down in the ditches and down by the river and everything is couches and chairs and refrigerators and things like that that people don't want to pay for to get rid of. But trash is trash. I mean, you really gotta, you gotta get rid of it. There's no way around it. And people aren't gonna stop throwing away trash because there's an extra $1 on the sticker,
And again, I think as much as we can explaining, it's now $500,000, is that, or is it 400,000? We are all paying in our property taxes. So it's readjusting where the money's coming from.
Right.
So it's appropriately the people who are using the service that,
Yeah, exactly.
there's some logic there that we ought to share as much as we can.
maybe just to kind of, like, this is really going to be sort of a look at it now. Maybe just, I know Mike's got a zillion things a lot of us do, but maybe we can get Nate, if you could kind of send them most recent versions of the solid waste budget to John and Tammy, and you guys can take a look at those kind of sticker revenues, what we're projecting out, based on what we're talking about, like, what you think we could, is that reasonable? I think it's about $100,000 more than last year, maybe like 70,000, but is that a good benchmark to move forward with?
Yeah,
knowing
and
that
look at the commercial billings and such, so we can take a look at
Yeah,
that.
by the way, since the last meeting, we have received from Hancock County a notification that the money that Fletcher's Landing pays and the money that we get from the unorganized territories that contract is coming up in June. So they sent the old contract, they sent a new contract they'd like us to sign, which I'm not in favor of, which basically has them paying the exact same amount.
Yeah, that should be good.
So that's new information, so I'm just passing that on to you guys. So that would be something we would also want to talk about
Yeah.
in the meeting.
Yeah.
Talk trash.
Talk trash.
That trash?
Love talking trash.
Great, so last thing here is the change
Thanks, Mike.
log high-level review. Ashley, I don't know if you had any major things. I know you've sent them out recently, but.
Here's the whole packet.
Yeah.
Yes, this might be one for the next meeting, please take a look. These include kind of discussions in council, any kind of edits as we've been going along. To review, feel free to let me know if you felt something wasn't there. There's one thing I know, Nancy, you mentioned on maybe wanting to bring the Historic Society from 4,000 back to 8,000, which was their request. And I'd kind of knocked that down because they hadn't spent the 8,000 they'd been previously requesting in previous years. But, I think.
So is this the Historic Society or the
The commission.
Sorry, the commission.
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 I have a sticky note for that.
Oh, great. Let's get rid of these sticky, I don't see too many around.
It was in my notes, I thought from the presentation Jen Sala made was, you had cut it from 8,000 to 4,000 based on current use of fiscal year 2025 spending, but she had explained she will be spending it down by 2025, or excuse me, by the end of fiscal year 2025. So in the email I sent, there's contracted grant writing, and then to get the grant, they need the matching funds. That's all part of their plan for fiscal year 2025, so they just haven't spent it yet, but still plan to. So it would be restoring them to the past year's
Right.
budget request.
And I think they were, the past 2 years they were under, so it was kind of like,
There's
but
new energy in the
there's
commission.
new energy, and especially seeing where we're at with the budget, I know 4,000 isn't gonna make or break this whole thing, but.
Yeah.
Well, we
Back-
just saved it on the, what was it, you just talking about brought it down to 2,500?
Yeah, I just saved you 3,500.
Well, we're still, and only 7,500. No, I think, and this is one of our commissions, if they can't,
Yeah,
we
we
can,
don't want to hobble commissions.
No.
we can encumber that funding over. It's not like we, send it out, so.
Have another conversation, but it's not budget related with you, so we can talk commission more.
Great.
Your favorite, I know.
So yeah, please, before the next meeting, review the change logs. If there's anything you felt wasn't accurately addressed there, we'll do a more detailed vehicle fleet discussion. Debt, bring that back in with sort of an updated debt schedule area. I think we'll be at a pretty darn close state. Nate Burkhardt, who helps us compile the budgets, does a zillion other things behind the scenes for this budget. He's out this week. One of the nice things about waiting till May 2 is we're going to be able to really go through this. I'll try to add the council recommendations into the narratives and have, I know we got a couple of things on vehicle fleets, but have something pretty close to, once council aligns on that before the budget, we can republish a final draft online for folks to review in the community, but also for council to have prior to the actual vote, to have a little bit of space. So we'll be trying to do that as soon as possible to get you the full updated budget book with all the change logs, with all the recommendations here.
Yeah, that would be great, the new summary page, and, we don't need all the back years and all of that stuff, just this year and what's changed and what it actually looks like for this year, because the analysis has really been done, it's now just double checking, so it doesn't need to be, at least I'm saying, I'm speaking for everybody, so I apologize, but just all I need is 2025, every department, where we are, show like what was asked for, the manager's recommendation, what the council's approved, and these discussions, and
I love that. I've got a little bar chart, data wrapper.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
it'd be much simpler, not all this, we don't need all the backup information, everything again, we've done that in the prior years.
Basically, budget overview section.
It's a budget overview. I'll update my manager's my budget message, I should say. I felt like it was interesting writing the budget message, and it was just like, now that we have this, I can really say, this is what's in this budget. This is some of the major changes, these are some of the investments, these are some of the future outlook things we are doing.
Your
some-
budget memo, is that what you're discussing?
Yeah, so I'll add something to that. We'll have a new budget update, but we're not going to print full books. Of course, the entire book will be online well ahead of that meeting for the final draft. And then if the council approves that, we'll switch that online book to final. We'll also print additional copies in City Hall for anybody to have. I always love to keep a final copy with myself as a city manager, so when I'm in meetings, I can look back on it, and if any councilors too would like to have a final draft, full budget book of the numbers themselves, happy to provide that, but it will be available online, so.
When can we expect the audit to be finished and like the encumbrances? Because I think that would be helpful too as we're looking at this, because I think maybe there's some like carryover money maybe that could help offset some of these numbers as well.
Nate, do we have an update from RHR, or?
Ashley and I have been working with them, and I think I mentioned at the committee meeting last Friday that the goal, they say, is to be the end of April. I'll be honest with you that they're asking for a lot of stuff right now. I don't know why they waited so long, but Ashley and I have been working on getting them invoices and everything that they need right now. So like I said, end of April is what I was told last week. We're gonna do everything in our power to get them everything they need. So hopefully they can hold their end of the bargain. But
Don't count.
Honestly. Are we at the time that we're gonna be going and looking?
One more year. Yeah, the
We're
FY
We still have
27.
another year?
So yes, we will be looking in FY '27, and, we'll be having that in process, but they are contracted for one more year. There, there might be a break contract clause in there, but,
I mean, everything's been reconciled, right? I mean, we're in 25 now. For 24, hasn't all that been reconciled and?
they sent first data
Yes.
package in early December, they gave us a list of the things we needed. Nate and team got it off in early December, and then it wasn't until a month ago, month and a
We're
half.
midway through April and they're still,
They said,
asking
we
for
need
stuff
this,
and
this, and
not
this,
doing
and
it.
then they came here for a day, but didn't seem like they were just totally working on our stuff that whole day either, so.
yeah.
So we'll be on another team, every check-ins we have with Nate and Ashley, we talk about it, we try to get an update there.
We'll push there, because it is hard not knowing what your budget, what your audit is and what it all looks like.
It's a very critical year. 2024 was that $3.6 million increase in the budget. I've mentioned it before. I noticed things like $1.8 million in additional roads that the council passed, but when I looked through the receipts, I only spent like $300,000. So, how was that funding allocated, but then reallocated towards other things? Those are, and to me too, like now that we have, one of the big things, we caught up on our audits upon arrival here to date, so that we could be in a better position here. So now that I was able to do some fiscal analysis on 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, based on the audits, because those, I think for most of those years, trying to look back at old budget books were not, it's not a good longitudinal database. But the audits, you can see these variances by departments and spending, and then we get into this fiscal year, 2025, much better system, trackable within there. I have confidence in that data. 2026, even more. But 2024, like I don't have the analogous departmental spends. We kind of had to go from 2020 to 2026, at the request level. So having that audited 2024 is a really important year for a lot of different reasons.
It's nice to know what the undesignated fund balance is, and, I'm sure there are projects in the budget that aren't completed.
Right.
That we want to
That
bring
you could
forward.
carry over and use
Yeah.
it for some of these smaller projects that we have and
Yeah.
stuff, so.
Because we haven't encumbered since I've been on the council.
Nope.
No, and we need to,
We really need to. We
This-
need to
this-
look at that even for this year. Look at unfinished projects that were budgeted, but we haven't.
yeah, it was one of the big surprises to me arriving and asking for some of the data. It's just like, we don't know what what we've expended, what we have, what we've promised to expend, where we're at on those things, so
It's nice not to be there anymore.
yeah, good stuff. Looking forward to also leading this project towards strategy, and very excited about that conversation. I know I've been talking to Sue a bit about it, how they've kind of structured things, even the conversation we just had now about solid waste and other things. There might be some better structural changes that we can workshop some of these things before they go to council meetings, make those more efficient. And some getting back to that, why, these council meetings last for a long time. Now they're getting better. The memo process, I think, has improved. Those have been shortened up, but, I think there might be a process that we can kind of workshop and get through the weeds on some of these different areas before it even comes to those meetings, so they can be a lot more fleshed out.
Are we having a strategic meeting to talk about priorities? Do something in June or something to talk about our priorities?
Yeah, I think I tried to get a meeting on the schedule for you and I with Ebony to talk upon my return from vacation.
Okay.
So that we can have a pre-planning meeting on how you'd like to see the schedule of meetings for that and priorities, and then touch with the council, and I think spend a lot of time on the first piece on, what are the outcomes we want to achieve, and, how we all feel about this. We talked a bit about that last time around. I have some ideas, but would love to talk more with you. Great.
Are we done? What?
I was hoping by 8 o'clock. so
I
this-
know.
We can talk some more if you want.
Staff,
Yeah, I mean,
I know staff sat here all night. Do you have anything that you want to add? Does anybody want to stay late? Of course Mike does.
Except Mike, I mean.
Yeah, no, you can send it, girl, go ahead. So we are all here because we all have major staff requests. And so we were requested to be here because we were under the understanding that you guys were gonna give your final recommendations on our requests. But I don't feel enlightened right now on our requests. So
Your request for,
like, is the excavator in, is it out? Is the trash box in, is it out? Is the camera in, is it out? Like,
We could talk, Mike. Yeah, we'll talk, Mike. It's in the band bond and unallocated. You know, I mentioned some of that here. Some of it's in the FY '26.
so I just wasn't following the conversation that you guys were, well, you weren't here for some of it, but I just didn't follow where we landed on some of that stuff, that's all.
I feel like I'm pretty solid in that. so
Okay.
I'll tell you
That's-
afterwards, yep.
all right, I think we're done.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.